What up, y'all? The Knight of Green here with an analysis on the swordplay of Dark Souls 3. While most martial artists would rag on this game for how unrealistic and impractical the swordplay is, which, to be honest, a lot of it is, I wanted to focus on the moves that have some basis in real-world historical techniques. Now, as a disclaimer, I study primarily German daggers, longswords, and greatswords, so I will put a focus on these weapons in this video. However, I do want to give props to shielded attacks from spears, thrusting swords, etc., as these are overall pretty solid and practical moves. Also, I want to point out the S-Dog strong attacks as they tie in feinting before the actual attack is delivered, which is pretty neat. Anyway, let's get on with the main weapons that I want to talk about. First, let's look at daggers. Realistically, one would use these weapons for either assassinations and for puncturing through gaps of armor on a downed or an incapacitated opponent. In Dark Souls, this aspect is translated into the attack modifiers that most daggers have on their critical attacks, like backstabs and riposte. However, if you were to use daggers in real life for these purposes, try doing the techniques that Sekiro does with his critical attacks. The basic one-handed dagger strikes are not designed to be initially lethal strikes. These would more or less be used to cut at an opponent's hands, fingers, or forearms to make them lose grip of their weapons before you deliver a killing strike of your own. When the dagger that is called, the dagger, is placed in the offhand, it is held in the ice pick grip, which is used to increase the armor punching capabilities of their thrusts. Speaking of a thrust from ice pick grip, the weapon art blind spot is a good example of a proper technique with this grip. It definitely would be an attack that one would use to go for someone's neck or for the body behind a small shield. There are also some parrying techniques that can be done with the dagger in this grip, and we see some very basic and simple parries done with the Parrying Greatsword's dagger. Another dagger to use offhand for parrying is, the Parrying Dagger, which is held forward as opposed to the ice pick grip that the dagger is held in. Unlike most of the other weapons outside of rapiers, this is a Renaissance weapon and is designed to displace an opponent's weapon away from harming you. While I would not recommend dual-wielding daggers, the techniques used by the Brigand twin daggers puts an emphasis on attacking from different angles with each weapon. This is not something that you see with most of the other dual-wielding weapons in the game, but realistically, this is what you should do if you are dual-wielding weapons. Also, while this is not exclusive to these daggers, the quick-step maneuver is pretty useful for moving out of harm's way, and it's much less riskier than rolling about in a fight. For straight swords, the best moves that they have are the standard weapon art attacks and the two-handed thrust of something like the Lothric Knight's sword and the short sword. The thrusts are pretty basic, but there is nothing wrong with these as they're pretty simple to do and they can work. And no, I'm not referring to the simple infusions, I'm just referring to doing it simply in a fight. The weapon art stance is known as the key guard, and the light attack is used in real life to strike underneath an opponent's guard, which then is translated into a guard break move in Dark Souls. Most greatswords have a similarly designed attack, except it is done horizontally and it's thrown from an ox guard. There is a bit of an overswing to these types of attacks, but they are overall solid for what they do. The weapon art strong attack of most straight swords and great swords are actually a parry technique called the crown guard, which is designed to displace an opponent's weapon upwards to expose their body to counterattacks. I did a whole video on this move if you wish to learn more about this guard position. Another good straight sword technique is the weapon art stance of the Ring Knight straight sword. This is known as the roof guard, and it is used to intimidate opponents by delivering powerful downward angled attacks. Now, moving on to greatswords. The standard two-handed strong attacks for most greatswords are what are known as middle hews or cuts. They are basic attacks designed to attack at an opponent's midsection. The next attack is the Black Knight Sword Strong attack, which is a rising hew from a low rear stance. Depending on the angle of the cut, you can target midsection, legs, head, arms, etc. with it. It is a very practical and widely used technique. Now let's look at the Claymore and the Hollow Slayer rolling attack. This attack exists in some variations on other greatswords like the Moonlight Greatsword and the Greatsword of Judgment, but the principles remain the same for all. The weapon is brought into an ox guard before a powerful thrust is delivered. This is also a very common technique, as it is designed to block strikes before delivering a counter strike of your own. This thrust you see on some greatswords is a basic thrust from the Plow guard. Nothing too much to say on it other than it is simple and effective, and it's very similar to the ones that you see on straight swords. The follow-up attack is a rising slash, very similar to the one done by the Black Knight sword, but it has a more vertical angle. Now, these are some of my favorite attacks. The Hollow Slayer and Drakeblood Greatsword use these as their two-handed lights, which they borrowed from their Dark Souls 2 counterparts. The first strike is an overhew done from the Roof Guard, which is a typical downward diagonal cut. It temporarily passes through what is known as the Fool's Guard before setting up into a Plow Guard. It then does a rising slash from a low rear guard, and then does a horizontal chop to the head and ends in an ox guard. All these are proper techniques, as well as they each end in a guard stance, which is something you should do after a swing in a real sword fight to help protect yourself against a counterattack. Last, I will cover the Astora Greatsword Charge. Now, as goofy as this looks, it has its origin in spear and lance techniques. With this move, the user anchors the weapon underneath their dominant arm in order to stabilize thrusts. You don't have to run with it, but I mean, you can do it if you want. Anyway, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this little thing. If you want me to look at martial arts in other games and movies, let me know, and I can see if I can get down to critiquing them. As of right now, we are very close to 450 subscribers on this channel. You know what that means. I have a special coming up for you guys. And to my current subs and followers, thank you for your support, your kind words, and your encouragement. It really means a lot to me, honestly, because I never thought that people would be interested in hearing a guy talk about this content on YouTube. Well, not to get too mushy, but remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to turn off notifications if you like this type of work. I will be coming out with more videos like this soon. So, anyway, bye.